Hello, this is Jamie with Happy Cards Company, and today we will be using the Hearts of Elegance stamp bundle. This is an online exclusive that you can find on my website, jamieburton.stampinup.net. And we're going to be using the dies. Now the dies are exclusive to this, but you could actually get the dies because the only dies that apply to the stamp set are the flower and the 2-leaf bundles, as I'm showing you here. Otherwise, the rest of it is all hearts of different shapes and patterns.
Sounds good.
So let's go ahead and look at our first card. Our first card is a simple, clean card that just says, "Be Mine," with a coordinating envelope. Now the envelope we will be doing also. The inside says Happy Valentine's Day, and that is my stamp on the back. Let's begin. I'm going to grab some cherry cobbler cardstock that measures 5.5 by 4 1/4. My card base measures 11 inches by 4 1/4, and it's scored at 5.5 on the 11-inch side. As I gather all of my supplies, we will also be stamping with cherry cobbler ink and embellishing with some cute little heart sequins. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to get started making this card. We're going to start by stamping the inside of the card first. And to do that, we're going to use our cherry cobbler ink, and we're going to be stamping a solid-like heart towards the top center. And then underneath that, we are going to be stamping the words Happy Valentine's Day, also in cherry cobbler. Now when stamping, I will hold my stamp on the paper for a few seconds just to let that ink absorb into the paper to give me a good image. It's very helpful when you do that with a solid type image so that you get a nice even layer of ink. It's not so much with the line stamps like the sentiment that I'm going to put on here, but it is helpful to give you that crisp look that you're looking for. All right, next up, we're going to move on and we're going to set this aside so that it can dry. I'm going to grab my white piece of cardstock and I'm going to stamp Be Mine in the lower right-hand corner. Now this cardstock will still need to be trimmed as it is not cut to size. The size I will trim it down to will be 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And that will give me a 1/16 inch of a border all the way around my card, which is just the perfect accent to the cherry cobbler. I just love the way it looks. Of course, I am using my Stampin' Up! Trimmer. I will say it is my favorite trimmer that I have ever owned, and I have owned a lot. Let's go ahead and grab our die cut heart, and I'm going to position it so that it's a little cockeyed on the front of my card, and then I will be folding over the overhang and gluing it down on the back, as you'll see here in just a moment. Make sure you apply enough glue to get good coverage on the back of your die cut. Now we're going to flip over this panel and I'm going to fold that edge of the heart over and I'm going to glue it down to the back. You have two options here. You could fold it over and glue it down just as I am doing, or you could actually just trim it off with a pair of scissors, whichever is easiest for you. I've done it both ways and it looks great either way. Don't you just love the way that heart looks with that foil marbled paper? Next, I'm going to grab a piece of ribbon, and the ribbon I did not measure, but I'm going to cut this long piece of ribbon in half, and then I'm going to tape it to the back on both sides of the card. This just saves a little bit of ribbon. There's not any major rhyme or reason. There's no advantage other than just saving materials and not using as much. When you think about if you made 15 cards like this and you saved about 3 inches per card, that would save you about 45 inches of ribbon. So in the long run, it does add up, but if you're only making 1 or 2 cards, you certainly don't have to cut it in the middle. I'm using my glass mat grid to help me line up the ribbon so I can make sure it is straight coming off of both sides. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to tie my bow. You'll notice here that I sure did not give myself much extra ribbon when tying my bow. It got a little tight and a little bit hard, but I was still able to make a pretty bow. Here I'm going to grab my reverse tweezers and I'm going to hold the knot in the middle to keep the ribbon tight while I try to manipulate the ribbon to tie this bow. See there, you can tell I don't have a lot of excess ribbon to play with, which makes tying the bow a little harder. That's okay though. In the end, it still worked out and I love how it turned out. I'm going to take a couple glue dots here, and I have just the mini glue dots here on my desk, so I'm actually going to take 2 off the package and stick it underneath that bow just to keep it secure and keep it from moving around on the card. Now this ribbon was from my stash. It's just like a burgundy organza ribbon. It's sheer and so pretty, and it matched this paper perfectly. I've probably had this ribbon in my stash for over 20 years. I'm so glad to finally be able to use it. All right, next up, I'm going to adhere this panel to the front or to the cherry cobbler cardstock that is already pre-cut. And then I will take both of these and I will glue them to the front of my card base. I just love how this card is so elegant. I'm gluing using art glitter glue. It is in a bottle that I put a piece of scrapbook paper on because my bottle was looking kind of trashy. Of course, now the scrapbook paper is looking kind of trashy, so I suppose I'll probably have to replace that bottle soon. All right, so remember after you've scored, you want to have the raised part on the inside of your card and the indented part on the outside of your card to keep your card from cracking when you fold it. Here I'm using my art glitter glue again and applying glue to the entire back of the cherry cobbler panel and gluing it on the front of my card. Now remember, this will take up the entire front and you should not have a white border around it. A lot of times when I use liquid glue, I'm afraid of seeing the lines through the cardstock. So I like to use my Cricut scraper to just press and move all the liquid glue around to flatten it out. To finish off this card, I am going to add some heart sequins. These are also available online and they are in gold foil colored. Now, as I was working, I noticed that I have a little bit of a red blemish on my bee. And so I will have to come back and fix that here shortly after I show you how to create the envelope. I just love having a matching envelope sometimes, don't you? All right, so here is my envelope, and I had that scrap piece of marbled paper. Now remember, it was just a scrap, and so it does not match the entire height of the flap on my card. So in this case, I'm just going to glue it to the bottom portion of the flap and line it up nicely with the bottom. It's okay that it doesn't go all the way to the top. It's still a nice accent. Make sure that you apply enough glue so that it does go edge to edge. I'm going to grab my silicone mat here and I'm going to press the glue again using my Cricut scraper to make sure I don't have any ridges coming through the paper of that liquid glue. When I feel like it's set perfectly, then I'm going to trim off the edges. And voila, I have a matching envelope for my beautiful Valentine's card. I am sure this would make even the postal workers happy delivering this card in the mail. Now, when I stamp my heart, you'll notice that I get ink everywhere. I must have stuck my finger in the ink because I went from having this project almost completely done to getting red marks all over it. Now watch closely. Oh, look, there's a red mark. And now all of a sudden I have red marks on the front of my envelope and on my card that I had talked about earlier. Now I'm going to have to do my best to cover up that image. You'll see I tried my sanding eraser and it did help a little bit, but I still had that ink smudge there and I certainly didn't want to waste this card. So I'm going to have to get crafty and figure out how I'm going to salvage it with that ink blemish. So I decide that I'm going to grab my Cherry Cobbler Stampin' Up! Blends and I'm going to add some cute dots all around my card in both the dark and the light to kind of make that little blemish look like it was done on purpose, and maybe it looks like it was a dot from the marker. It's not ideal, but it does work in a pinch when you don't want to have to redo the entire card because you got ink somewhere where you did not want it. And I still think the overall card project and matching envelope still turned out pretty great. You'll notice when I go to fix the envelope, I end up having to use my Cherry Cobbler ink pad to swipe it around the edges because I wasn't going to dot the entire card. But I do like a good swipe every now and again. If it's an old school technique that still packs a punch. I still like to do it once in a while. You'll see here that those blemishes aren't getting blended in very well with those random dots that I'm trying to do to cover it up like I did on the card. So here I go. I'm going to grab my red ink pad and I'm just going to let the swiping begin. And the nice thing about swiping is the messier it is, the better it looks. So adding some extra ink smudges all around sure does make those other little blemishes blend in and make it look like it was done on purpose. What do you think? That is all for our first card. I'm going to quickly stamp the back with my stamp that says Handmade with Love by Jamie Burton, and then we will move on to our next card. So pretty. I think this is one of my favorite cards this Valentine's season. The next card that we're going to do is a shaped card, and it's shaped like a heart. And I use the largest heart die cut to die cut this heart. Now, I won't show you how I did it on screen, but I'll tell you that I folded my cardstock and then I put my die just slightly above the fold and I ran it through my die cut. So you can see on the base of the card I'm going to do, it has two little flat edges. All right, so let's go on. What am I doing now? I took the inside of the heart that I die cut with the patterned heart die from the die set, and I stamped Happy Valentine's Day on that. I'm going to set that aside to dry, and then I'm going to stamp the Be Mine. You'll notice on my sample card, we did fussy cut the Be Mine out. Yes, I know it's fussy cutting, but it was just a little bit, and I think it added so much to the card. For the flowers, I'm going to grab my Stampin' Mat because the flower is solid and the leaves are solid, and I want to make sure that I get a good image when I'm stamping those. So I'm going to need, as you can see, 3 flowers, and then I will need 2 sets of leaves. You'll notice here that image, that second image, did not turn out so well, so I will not be using that image. I will just stamp an extra one here, and then I will die cut them all out. It's not a big deal. I have plenty of paper, and it's easy enough to stamp and die cut the other one. I won't die cut the messed up one. For the leaves, I used garden green ink. So the only two colors of ink that I used on this card and both cards was cherry cobbler and garden green. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my Anna Griffin Empress machine, and I'm going to die cut all the flowers and the leaves out to get ready to assemble onto the front of my card. It's so pretty. Oh, I guess I'm not die cutting yet. I'm letting that ink dry. Now I'm going to show you with the dies, which dies I use. You can see that die lines up, and there's a slight little open spot at the top where I did not put the die on the paper. This die creates a cute pattern on the inside, around the edges of the heart. And I use this die for both the inside of the card and the designer series paper that I used on the front of the card. I also used one of the other heart dies for the gold heart that you see on my sample. Now during class, I had several people decide that they could not possibly cover up that beautiful marbled paper, and they glued their heart with marble side up. Of course, I really like the tone-on-tone look from this side of the paper, and it does accent this card nicely. So I will still use the tone-on-tone side. I'm going to use my art glitter glue to glue both of those hearts to the card, the tone-on-tone one to the front and the white one to the inside of the card. That ink has had enough time to dry and should not smear at this point. Here you can see I have a whole pile of those gold hearts. I just love them, so I cut a whole bunch out so that I could use them on other projects. Now I think I'm going to be die cutting out those hearts. Oh, I guess not. I guess I will be fussy cutting the Be Mine. So here I trimmed down the cardstock to be a little smaller just because it's easier to work with. Then I'm going to cut the word B out, and the B is going to be just a small rectangle, and I'm going to get as close to it as I can so that it does not interfere with the mine part of the word. Next, you'll notice when I'm fussy cutting around the word mine, I'm moving the paper that has the word on it, and I'm not really moving my scissors. I'm really trying to move that paper around with my left hand and guide it while the scissors close and open just so slightly to get a nice clean cut. Now a trick is if you have like bent edges after you've done some fussy cutting, we all get those. Just use your bone folder, or I could use my Cricut scraper, and I just go over around the edges. Here I'm guiding the paper just a little bit because there's not a lot of paper left, and so it's getting a little bit hard to maneuver. So you saw I just used my finger to help guide that around. See, I told you it doesn't take long to fussy cut the word, and you don't have to be real perfect with it because it's going to go over the top of the flowers and nobody will notice any blemishes anyway, because this card is also so very beautiful. There we go, and it's done just like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and set those two aside, and I am going to get my flowers die cut out so that we can put them on the front of our card. Again, I'm using my Anna Griffith Empress machine to do all of the die cutting. And I won't bore you with having to watch me die cut all of the pieces. Right here, I'm just going to cut down my pieces to be a little bit smaller, and I cut the flower I didn't want in half so that I didn't accidentally use it. And then I will cut apart the leaves, and I'll be ready to add the die cuts. Now remember, I told you at the beginning of this video, there's only 3 dies that actually match the steps. stamps. One is this flower and one is the leaf bundle. The other one is a leaf that is all by itself. So if you just wanted the dies and not the stamps, you'd only have 3 small dies that you wouldn't really need. But I like the bundle, and I can see myself using this stamp set again and again because it has a beautiful font sentiment and all those fun hearts. And I really do like the flowers. All right, so now we have our hearts or our flowers and leaves all die cut out, and we're going to get ready to assemble our card. Now, when I'm looking at my card, the flower that is in the upper left-hand side of the heart is glued down flat. And then I glued the leaves on the back of the other 2 sets of flowers that I will pop up. And then I will put foam tape on the backs of those after I've glued the leaves on, and we'll pop those up. 1 flower. My heart is also glued flat, so I'm going to go ahead and get that done. And now I'm going to glue my leaves onto my flowers. I'm going to realize here that I put the needle in and I didn't need to yet. Grab my silicone mat, put my 2 flowers upside down. I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to each, and then I'll adhere my leaves. Next, I will add some of the dimensionals, and you can see that my dimensionals are gone, and I'm just using the edge of the dimensional sheet. All of it works, and nobody's going to know the difference, and it will still pop up my flowers perfectly. It's so satisfying to finish a whole sheet of dimensionals. I don't know about you, but at least I think it's satisfying. This is my first voiceover, and I'm feeling like it's pretty monotone. I guess you'll have to let me know what you think. I'm sorry that you can hear the dogs barking in the background. It seems that I can't ever get a quiet moment around here. All right, now I popped up the 2 flowers. Now I'm going to cut a little piece of foam tape to put behind my little rectangle bee. This little piece of foam tape will be a little bit too big, so I'll have to trim it down as well. And then I will glue the word mine down flat to the front of the flowers. My final steps for this card are just going to be to add 3 of those gold sequence hearts in a triangle fashion and to stamp the back with my stamp. This one did not get a matching envelope, so we won't have to worry about that. I like to use some art glitter glue when gluing down my sequins because I don't always feel like the little glue dots that are on the sequins are enough, and I really don't want them to fall off. So just a little dot of glue helps to secure them to the front of the card. Little bugger was hard to get. All right, and there we are. I've added the 3 little sequence hearts. And now on my original card, I did add some white gel pen highlights, But I'm not going to do that to this card. I think it looks beautiful either way. And you'll notice on my original card that the white highlights on the flower actually turned pink because of the red ink. Now I did the tone-on-tone stamping, so my stamp is there, but it's not real bright. It's just kind of a little bit darker than the cardstock. So that's my class for today. I hope you like the modifications that I had to do to the new card on the first card sample that I did. And I hope you like the modification I did on the second card by not adding the white gel pen. Again, you can always choose to do that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.